I have gone ahead and made a map of Nahash. Was gonna post the pencil drawing from the game, but I realized it has some sketched-in changes that happened over the course of the battle, plus it's a pencil sketch I made years ago, so it looks like trash. Greenish color represents settled areas filled with houses, neighborhoods, etc. If I feel really ambitious, maybe I'll draw individual blocks so you can see roads and stuff, but probably not. I'm going to take us back again, a little, to fill in a few more events Steelshod has been experiencing at Nahash while Alexander and Yoren busied themselves with the events of the last few posts. Defensive preparations have been extensive. Ignis, Jaspar, and Mucker have been especially busy, working with Varley to improve the defensive capabilities of Nahash. They construct not one, nor two, but 3 ballistae. One in the watchtower that looms over the Serpentis Keep in the middle circle, one in the highest tower of the Council Keep on the north side of the inner circle, and one to the southwest wall of the inner circle. They mount each ballista on a mobile swivel, sight them out so that they can fire a good distance beyond the edge of the outer circle. They also place small markers in the snow in every direction to aim by. Technically at this point, all 3 ballistae may not be 100% operational, as they continue working on them throughout the siege, but at least the first one is ready to go. Furthermore, they begin constructing mini ballistae to position above every gate. Basically, just an oversized crossbow, able to be manned by 1 or 2 men, but still packing a good punch. They also examine the walls, particularly the outermost walls surrounding the middle circle. Not castling, these Torathian-made walls are notably inferior. Triple-thick layers of palisade-style walls made of shaped tree trunks, sealed tightly together, and the spaces between each layer filled with earth and gravel. Not easily burned down, and quite thick, but wood is wood. In some places, both the inner and outer walls have fallen into disrepair. It's been many, many years since Nahash was under any direct threat. Most of Tarathia's wars in the last century or more have been stopped at Tinian, if they came to Tarathia at all. Steelshod's engineers quickly get crews to work shoring up these obvious deficiencies. They reinforce the walls in every way they can, and prepare to reinforce spots that suffer heavy attacks during the coming fighting. Once the council approves the effort to go all out, they even begin cannibalizing some of the buildings in the outer circle, and ships from the evacuated harbor on the far side of the Tyre River. They extract the lumber and stone for their own fortification efforts. There's some concern that the watchtower outposts, staggered at regular intervals through the outer circle, will just provide the Vartror a good place to shoot from. So Mucker begins analyzing the towers for structural deficiencies, and they put together some plans to trap the towers. Some are simple, crude traps involving ropes or crossbows. Others more complex, with at least one carefully dug tunnel, and a small charge of thunderbolt, allowing them to bring down an entire tower on demand when the thunderbolt is detonated. Most towers are not trapped at all, of course. They just don't have time, for one thing, but also, this will give the defenders the ability to utilize some towers, while the enemy hopefully avoids them for fear of more traps. Meanwhile, the recruits are undergoing training. Not just the Misvia recruits, but hundreds, and eventually thousands, of peasant levies. The men and women of Nahash, called to defend their homes. Perrin and Brother Khalid take the lead on managing the training sessions, basic formations, spear-wielding, and other rudiments of fighting. Leona, Gerald, and Evan are called upon to help guide the trainees. Leona, due to her extensive experience in formation fighting as a hoplite, and her expertise in the spear. Gerald and Evan train them up as soldiers and give horse-riding lessons to those capable of riding, with access to a horse, with other Steelshod helping as they can. Oliver is in this mix, of course, seeing Steelshod from the outside as heroic figures that rode in to save Nahash at the last minute. Steelshod works him like a dog. Early mornings, late-night learnings to read with Hubert, long, grueling exercises. He is spared no task despite his infirmity. I fucked up earlier and called Oliver an orphan, but actually he has a father, a night soil collector like him, who tried to convince him not to go off with Steelshod to war, and almost certain death. But Oliver wants to be something more than a shit shoveler, and he told his father he was going to be a soldier and fight for Tarathia, even if it killed him. He's not about to go back on that oath now. He works twice as hard as the other lads from Miss Veer, eventually picking up his second stat-boosting tier to go along with Down to Business. This new one I have called Great Typhoon, granting a con bonus. I let Yoren's player name them, by the way. I assume you will all recognize the reference sooner or later. He draws a lot of hate from the other boys at first, for his club foot and his enthusiastic attitude, but he weathers their insults and keeps his cool, especially when Hubert gives him some advice on the matter. This show of willpower earns him as a forest with a wisdom bonus. He gets Coursing River, a much-needed dex bonus, after achieving his greatest triumph to date. Perrin declares that the lads will fight in a mock melee, along with a dozen other young teens from Nahash. Oliver knows he's fucked, as the other kids will likely knock him out early. So like any good Steelshod would, he preps the ground. The night before, he asks Hubert for a loan, and Hubert gives him the largest sum he's ever seen. A gold piece. Oliver breaks the coin and hires a bunch of local lads. They help him slip out into the yard and create muddy, slick patches in the snow-dusted frozen dirt of the melee battleground. He also pays a few of them to make a stockpile of snowballs and start peppering everyone who isn't him when the melee begins. It pays off immensely. His knowledge of the tricky patches of ground neutralize the mobility advantage the uncrippled boys would have. The snowballs distract them as well, and when the melee ends, Oliver stands tall. Victorious. Evan scoffs at the victory, calls Oliver a cheat, but Hubert from the sidelines observes that Perrin did not restrict any of the actions Oliver took. Perrin, when in teacher mode, has no favorites and takes no sides, but he acknowledges Hubert is correct. Oliver has won. Evan still says the boy is a cheat and a coward, so Oliver challenges Evan to a one-on-one sparring match. A duel. Evan laughs, and the crowd that watched the melee laughs too. Everyone joins in, except Perrin, Hubert, and Oliver. "Wait, are you serious?" Evan growls. "Yes'm, I am," Oliver says. "Unless you're afraid." "Kid, I'd crush you." "You may be a cheat, but I don't want to kill you for it," Evan says. "I can take a beating, sir. I'm no coward, and I didn't cheat." Evan sighs, but he gears up and faces off against the adolescent cripple, and we see Perrin's tears shine here. Perrin grants Oliver bonuses to attack, damage, defense, bonus HP, and a once-per-session advantage on an attack roll. Oliver stands his ground against Evan, and he does indeed take a beating, but he gets up each time. And when he pops his Perrin-granted ability, he scores a critical hit against Evan that bloodies the knight in one go and inflicts a minor head wound. The hit is so ferocious, Perrin calls a halt to the duel. Evan's bell has been rung something fierce, and the crowd, dumbfounded, realizes Oliver just won. More Great Typhoon is granted here, or maybe as a forest. And Evan's next tier will be called Schooled by Trainees for Good Reason. After that, Evan and Gerald fast-track Oliver onto horseback training, which he picks up naturally, and he builds out his class, a competent mounted warrior with some charisma-based buffs to his allies. After the fight, the other kids aren't sure how to handle him, and so he uses his charisma, his best stat, and his bullshitting skill to chat with the other lads, get to know them, deflect their bigotry, and, surprisingly, win them over. This gets him another bonus tier, Dark Side of the Moon, a further +1 to his charisma. Drengi and Hrodier report that the Ulfsknar are scouting very close to Nahash now, and Herr Bjornsson's army appears to be rapidly approaching. Joren and Alexander decide to harass their foe one last time before the siege, so they mount up with most of their company, along with Torthian and 100 or so Serpentes. Enoch wants the chance to see them in action, so him and his 2 silent bodyguards ride along as well. They cut down a few scouting parties and find Bjornsson's massive column marching up the main road, no more than a day or 2 away. They strike at the flanks of the main Svardic column in a lightning surprise attack. By the time the Svards have formed up defenses, the Serpentes are gone. Light casualties on both sides, really, but they retreat back to Nahash, knowing just how little time they have left. As their last days draw to a close, Enoch holds another war council. Varley begins drawing up big picture strategic goals, and they divide up the defensive responsibilities. Enoch remains the overcommander to oversee the siege from a high tower unless called into action. Torthian has become the de facto cavalry commander, as was his specialty in Kashar's army. Khalid commands the troops along the walls. Which leaves Steelshod. The city's primary source of fresh water is the Tyre, but the canals of the docks district don't reach inside the walls, though they do rest in the shadow of the walls. Enoch wants to hold the docks as long as possible, using the canals, the natural barrier of the river, and wall on the east and west. They can create smallish entry points, but the bottom line is that they will be outside the walls. It is likely the most difficult, dangerous role for them to play, and of course, they accept. At the docks, the engineers immediately set to work with the raw materials they've been gathering, building simple walls and blockades along the canal roadways. Agrippa sets up a medical station inside a large empty warehouse. Which reminds me, here is Agrippa's sheet, with the same tiers as the Hubert I posted. Like almost all of Hubert's stuff, and unlike Leona's, Agrippa's future tiers lack major spoilers, so I didn't remove them. But there's one tier worth calling out specifically. Miracle Worker. Fucking Miracle Worker. Here's how it works. Each session, Agrippa rolls a biology check. He records the results. That result is his miracle reserve. He can spend miracle points, to reduce injury severity. He spends an amount equal to the levels plus tiers of the targets, and he can reduce injuries from death to a mortal wound. A misnomer. A mortal wound guarantees a permanent penalty, often results in loss of an affected limb, and can result in death over time if they don't roll good saves. Or from mortal to critical, or from critical to standard, or from standard to essentially non-existent. Example, Agrippa rolls a d20, comes up with 12, plus 5 from skill ranks, plus 4 from tier bonuses to biology, plus 4 from int for a total of 25. Now let's say 11, who was around tier 8 at the time, suffers a blow that knocks him to negative bloodied, aka instant death. Instead, I give Yoren's player a chance to declare him a miracle target. He spends level 5 plus tier 8 equals 13 points of his miracle reserve, and 11 is now mortally wounded instead. But now, if Alexander, tier 12, let's say, so total miracle cost of 17, takes a mortal wound, he is shit out of luck, not enough miracle left. Make sense? Miracle Worker is Agrippa's tier 6, and it is the other piece of the puzzle when people ask why so few Steelshod members die. I do rule that some deaths can't be helped or prevented by Miracle Worker, and he doesn't argue, and Agrippa isn't everywhere, and he can roll low, but it's a huge factor. Speaking of notable tiers, I am not posting Yoren yet, but I will post some of his recent tiers at this point in the game. I think they're the 3 tiers he gains over the course of Nahash, so he may not have them quite yet, but he gets them as we go. His tier 12 is called Shed a Tier. When he targets an enemy with an ability or attack, he can negate one of their tiers. He tells me broadly what he wants to negate, and I choose an appropriate tier bonus. This is annoying as fuck in Nahash, up against a wide variety of elite Terbjornsson champions with a host of unique abilities. His tier 13 is called Tip the Scales. When he negates a tier with Shed a Tier, he gains the tier from them. Over time, we find this is too clunky, so we modify it, so instead it gives him a tier from a list of Tip the Scales special tiers. Basically, corresponding by stat and general intent of the tier. Strength, wisdom, defensive, passive, etc. And his tier 14 is one of my own invention, called Torath's Own Luck. Anytime he rolls anything, he tosses a d6 for Torath. This d6 does nothing, except if it comes up a 1. He can pair this 1 with any 1 he rolled on the real dice in order to maximize the roll. A small boost to damage, where this becomes awesome in his d20 checks. Now, when he rolls a nat 1, instead of rolling a second d20 and critting on another nat 1, he just tosses his Torath's d6 and turns it into a crit 1 in 6 times. While preparing the dock's defenses, Varley makes another observation. The two bridges to the south and north will provide Thorbjornsson ample ability to maneuver his troops around Nahash, but if they can cut him off from at least one bridge, this would dramatically reduce his ability to deploy men quickly at the docks. To reinforce the north or south side of the docks would require the other side to go the long way around, to the east. Alexander has Ignis complete the dock's barricades, and tasks Jaspar and Mucker with examining the bridge. But before they can dig into this project, they wake the following morning to find the Svardic army camped out on their doorstep. It appears that during the night, Thorbjornsson's army stole a march and has now assembled less than a mile south of Nahash. He has not spread his forces around to encircle the city yet, just massing his tens of thousands of troops along the south. They see Svards, Krigars, Castline legions, Lorrainette chevaliers, Bersarks, a multicultural force easily 10 or 20 times the size of the defenders, unless you count every ill-trained conscript as the equal of a seasoned Svardic reaver. Through a looking glass, they see Thorbjornsson's people move out to the empty ground between the city's edges and the Svardic camp. In this wide expanse of flat, snowy ground, likely a farm during summer, they lay out a large wooden table and a few chairs. Thorbjornsson and a handful of his men walk out to this no-man's land and wait. As it was at Kilchester, it appears Thorbjornsson wants to parley. Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the PayPal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.